Captain Pierce, there's thunder outside. I'm so scared. Can you come check on me? It was 11 p.m. when Sophie called, her voice choked with sobs. Adrian Pierce grabbed his car keys and headed for the door. I stood behind him, my voice soft. Adrian, if you walk out that door tonight, we're done. For good. He gripped the door handle, not even bothering to turn around. He just scoffed coldly. Hannah, don't threaten me with a breakup. You can't live without me. The whole airline knows it. The door slammed shut. He didn't look back. Not once. I crouched down and slipped off the plane band he'd put on my finger himself. The moment it slid past my knuckle, I realized something. Taking it off didn't hurt as much as I'd imagined. I pulled out my phone and dialed another number. Ethan, you mentioned last time that Doctors Without Borders still needs a logistics coordinator? A gentle voice came through the line. You're welcome anytime, but didn't you say you needed more time to think it over? I smiled and tossed the ring into the trash. No need to think anymore. My husband died in his mistress's bed. I can leave tomorrow. Hannah's POV. 30,000 feet up, on a flight from New York to Los Angeles. The plane suddenly hit severe turbulence. The violent, weightless sensation sent the entire cabin into a brief panic. Overhead bins clunked dully. Uncollected paper cups tumbled through the air, splattering brown coffee everywhere. I was in the rear cabin checking seatbelts when the unexpected jolt threw me completely off balance. I crashed hard onto the aisle floor. My knees slammed against the sharp metal edge of the service cart, and excruciating pain shot through my entire body. I gritted my teeth, cold sweat sliding down my temples. Before, whenever there was even the slightest turbulence, the cockpit's intercom would ring back to the rear cabin immediately. Adrian's deep, steady voice would come through the static. Hannah, are you hurt? Find a seat and buckle up. Don't be scared. He would even break protocol to request altitude changes from the tower just to spare me a bit of turbulence. Everyone in the airline knew that lead flight attendant Hannah Bennett was the treasure Captain Pierce had protected for 7 years. But now, the intercom was dead silent. I gripped the service cart and forced myself to stand. Pushing through the searing pain in my knee, I summoned my professional smile to reassure the panicked passengers. Everyone, please stay calm and fasten your seatbelts. It's just normal turbulence. Just then, the cabin PA crackled to life. It wasn't Adrian's reassuring voice that came through, but a young, sweet, even slightly excited female voice. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your first officer, Sophie. The plane is experiencing some turbulence, but please don't worry. Captain Pierce is teaching me how to handle it right now, and we'll land safely. I froze. My nails dug deep into my palms, and every breath sent pain shooting through my chest. So while the turbulence had been at its worst, he'd been in the cockpit patiently teaching Sophie how to fly through it. He was giving the favoritism and privilege that had once been mine alone, without reservation, to a new female pilot who'd been with the airline less than 3 months. 2 hours later, the plane touched down smoothly at Los Angeles International Airport. In the crew corridor, Adrian walked at the front, his captain's uniform crisp, his posture impeccable. Sophie trailed right beside him like a happy little bird, chattering away about the close call. I dragged my heavy flight case at the very back. My right knee was swollen, and every step felt like walking on knife blades. Limping, I fell far behind. Adrian stopped and turned to look at me, his brow furrowed tight, impatience clear in his voice. Hannah, hurry up. The whole cruise bus is waiting for you. I stopped, looking at him from several feet away. That face I'd loved for 7 years was now filled with coldness. I hurt my leg, I said quietly. No self-pity, just stating a fact. Adrian's expression didn't flicker. His voice was ice cold. As lead flight attendant, you don't know to secure yourself first during turbulence. Where's your professionalism? Don't use excuses like that to drag your feet. Sophie tugged at Adrian's sleeve from the side, cutting in with that sweet, syrupy voice. Captain Pierce, Don't be harsh on her. I'm sure she didn't mean to. Back in the cockpit, if you hadn't held my hand to guide me through the controls, I would have been terrified. Held her hand. I lowered my eyes, hiding the sting in them. I took a deep breath, gripped my case, and quickened my pace. I walked right past them, heading straight for the crew bus. As I passed, I didn't spare Adrian a single glance. Hannah's POV. On the crew bus. The window seat in the first row had always been mine. Did I get a little carsick, so Adrian had made it a rule that no one else could sit there. Every time before I boarded, there would be a cup of warm water Adrian had prepared waiting in the cup holder. I dragged my injured leg onto the bus and instinctively headed for the first row, only to find Sophie already sitting there, holding a steaming cup of warm water in her hands. When she saw me, Sophie blinked her big innocent eyes and bit her lower lip. Hannah, I'm so sorry. I get a bit carsick, and Captain Pierce told me to sit here. You don't mind, do you? I stared at that cup of warm water. My stomach churned. I turned to look at Adrian, who'd come up behind me. Adrian avoided my eyes, tossing his flight bag onto the seat next to Sophie. He spoke flatly. She's new, and she's not feeling well. Go sit in the back. Don't make a fuss with her. Don't make a fuss with her. My lips twitched. I didn't say a word. I turned and walked to the very back row of the bus. The bus started, rocking and swaying. I sat in the corner of the last row, watching as Adrian tilted his head towards Sophie in the first row, patiently explaining something. Sophie laughed happily. I closed my eyes and rested my head against the cold window. At the crew hotel, Adrian got the room keys at the front desk. He handed one to Sophie, his voice gentle. Get some good rest. I'll take you somewhere nice for dinner tonight. Then he tossed the other key onto the counter without even looking at me. Yours. I picked up the key and rode the elevator up alone. Back in my room, I peeled off my uniform and rolled up my pant leg. My right knee was already mottled purple, swollen like a macaron that I didn't get ice, didn't apply any ointment. I just sat quietly on the edge of the bed, staring at the bruise. Did it hurt? You get used to it after a while. The pain stops registering. I pulled out my phone and opened the airline's internal system. Pinned to the homepage was a recruitment notice. Notice regarding the selection of outstanding cabin crew for long-term deployment to Damascus. Damascus, a volatile city in the Middle East, constant warfare, brutal conditions, where even basic personal safety couldn't be 100% guaranteed. Once you went, you couldn't transfer back for at least 3 years, essentially severing yourself from your current comfortable life. The posting had been up for 2 weeks. Out of thousands of flight attendants in the entire airline, not a single person had signed up. I stared at the screen for a long time. Before, Adrian would fuss for hours over me flying a single red-eye. He'd find every way to switch me to his daytime routes. He used to say, Hannah, as long as I'm here, you'll never have to suffer through anything like that. But now, the man who promised to protect me forever was holding his umbrella over someone else. I didn't hesitate. My finger tapped lightly, filling out the application, and I hit submit. A dialog box popped up. Once submitted, this application cannot be withdrawn. Please confirm to continue. I pressed confirm. Watching the screen display, submission successful, pending review, I let out a long breath. It was like I'd finally carved out a piece of rotting flesh from inside myself. Hannah's POV. That evening, the crew dinner. It was at a famous seafood place in LA. When I walked into the private room, all the food was already on the table. A whole spread, tuna, lobster, oysters. I stopped in the doorway. I'm allergic to seafood. Severely. Even a tiny bit makes me break out in hives and struggle to breathe. Before, Adrian would never bring the crew out for seafood. If there really was no other option, he'd order me a steak separately, then sweep all the shrimp and crab away from my place, declaring possessively, "You can only watch me eat." Today, there was no steak. Because Sophie had pouted on the bus that we absolutely had to have great seafood while in LA. I found a seat at the edge of the table and sat down. Sophie put on disposable gloves, peeled a plump shrimp, and naturally placed it in Adrian's bowl. "Captain Pierce, try this. It's amazing." Adrian didn't refuse. He picked up the shrimp, popped it in his mouth, and nodded. "Good." A sharp pain twisted in my stomach. I picked up the beer in front of me, took a sip, and didn't touch the food. Adrian noticed my empty plate from the corner of his eye, his brow furrowed, displeasure in his tone. "Why aren't you eating? Everyone's enjoying themselves. Are you trying to ruin the mood right now?" The room went silent in an instant. Everyone looked at me. I set down my glass and looked Adrian directly in the eye, my voice calm and steady. "I'm allergic to seafood. Did you forget?" Adrian's hand froze mid-shrimp peel. A flash of frustration crossed his eyes, but it was quickly buried under irritation. He grabbed a napkin, wiped his hands, and said coldly, "So you're allergic. Just ask the waiter to add a dish. Why make everyone uncomfortable?" Sophie shot up, her eyes red, looking like she'd suffered the greatest injustice in the world. "I'm so sorry, Hannah, that I didn't know you were allergic. Captain Pierce never mentioned it. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have asked for seafood." Her tears made me look like the wicked one bullying the new girl. A few of the first officers nearby quickly comforted Sophie. "It's okay, you didn't know. It's not your fault." I'd had enough. I stood up and grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair. "You all enjoy. My stomach's bothering me. I'm heading back first." Without acknowledging the storm cloud darkening Adrian's face, I pushed open the door and walked out. It had started pouring outside at some point. LA rain always comes fast and hard. I didn't have an umbrella. I stood under the restaurant's awning, staring blankly at the curtain of rain. Before, when it rained, Adrian would take off his jacket and wrap it around me, holding me tight against him. He'd hold the umbrella, with most of his body getting soaked, just to keep me from getting a single drop on me. Now, I stood here alone, the cold wind cutting through my thin shirt. Footsteps came from behind me. Adrian stepped out under a black umbrella, with Sophie pressed tight against his side, both her hands wrapped around his arm. When he saw me, Adrian paused. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something. But Sophie shivered at that exact moment and burrowed closer into him. "Captain Pierce, I'm so cold. Let's hurry." Adrian's gaze lingered on my thin frame for a second, then finally turned away. He shielded Sophie and walked straight to a taxi waiting at the curb. The door slammed shut. The car drove off quickly. The wheels rolled through a puddle, splashing dirty water that soaked my pant legs. I stood there, watching the car disappear into the rainy night, and suddenly laughed. As I laughed, tears mixed with rain came pouring down. Hannah's POV. I went back to the New York apartment we shared. I pushed open the door. The place was pitch black. I didn't turn on the lights. By the moonlight from the window, I dragged a 20-inch suitcase out of the storage closet. My Damascus deployment application had passed the initial review. Next week was the in-depth physical examination. I started packing. There wasn't much to pack, really. This apartment was filled with things Adrian had bought me. The closet was hung with dresses he'd picked. The vanity was covered with skincare he'd bought. I only took a few old clothes I'd bought myself, a few books I read often, and stuffed them in the case. At 11 p.m., the lock turned. Adrian was home. He reeked of alcohol, with a faint trace of perfume clinging to him, that cloying peach scent Sophie loved. Click. The living room lights came on. Adrian loosened his tie. When he saw the suitcase in the middle of the living room, his brow knotted instantly. "You have a trip? The schedule didn't show you had any flights." I put the last book in the case and zipped it up, just packing some old clothes to throw out. Adrian walked over and reflexively reached out to hug me. I stepped back, avoiding his touch. Adrian's hand froze in midair, his expression darkened instantly. "Hannah, how long are you going to keep this up? You've been acting like this since we got back from LA." Sophie is just a student the company assigned to me. So I took care of her a little more. What's the big deal? Do you have to be this petty? I stood up straight and looked at his eyes, slightly red from the alcohol. Just a student? My voice was soft but clear. Does a student need you to pick her up after work at midnight? Does a student need you to give her my first officer position? Does a student need you to forget my seafood allergy just to satisfy her cravings? Adrian raked a frustrated hand through his hair. You never used to be this petty. You're a great lead flight attendant. Can't you be reasonable? Stop being so immature like a little girl. His words struck me as the height of irony. He used to say, Hannah, you never have to be reasonable in front of me. I'll handle everything for you. Now, he was complaining I wasn't reasonable enough. Just then, Adrian's phone, sitting on the table, rang. Sophie's name flashed on the screen. Adrian glanced at me, then picked up. In the quiet living room, Sophie's tearful voice came through crystal clear. Captain Pierce, there's thunder outside. I'm so scared. Can you come check on me? I'm too scared to sleep alone. Adrian didn't hesitate at all. He turned to grab his car keys by the door. Don't be scared. I'm coming over right now. I watched his back and suddenly spoke. Adrian, if you walk out that door tonight, we're done. For good. Adrian's hand froze on the door handle. He turned around, his eyes filled with certainty and mockery. Hannah, don't threaten me with a breakup. You can't live without me. The whole airline knows it. When I come back tomorrow, I hope you'll have calmed down. The door slammed shut. I stood in the empty living room. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I walked to the TV stand and picked up the picture frame. Inside was the photo of us from 3 years ago under the Eiffel Tower. Adrian was kissing my forehead, smiling with such tenderness. I opened the frame, pulled the photo out, ripped it into pieces, and threw it in the trash. Hannah's POV. The last flight I worked with Adrian was New York to Chicago. Sophie was in the cockpit as an observer. Mid-flight, she came out to use the restroom. As she passed through first class, the plane hit a small patch of turbulence. Sophie's foot slipped. The coffee cup in her hand went flying, landing squarely on a VIP passenger's laptop. Are you blind? The passenger exploded with rage, jumping to his feet. I've got tens of millions in contract data on that computer. Can you afford to replace it? Get me your lead flight attendant. I'm filing a complaint. Sophie went pale with terror, tears spilling instantly. She covered her face and ducked behind the work area, not even managing a single apology. I heard the commotion and rushed over immediately. I glanced at Sophie trembling behind the curtain, but didn't say anything. I grabbed a towel, walked over to the passenger, and bowed at a perfect 90 degrees. Sir, I'm so sorry. This was our staff's mistake. Our airline will cover the full cost of cleaning and repairing your laptop. If you have any data loss, we'll also assist you through the compensation process. The passenger was furious. He pointed at me and cursed for a full half hour. All kinds of vile words rained down on me, but I maintained my bow the entire time without a single word of defense. It wasn't until the plane landed and the passenger signed the compensation agreement that things finally settled down. The crew conference room. Adrian sat at the head of the table, his face dark as stone. He slammed the complaint form down on the table, his cold gaze sweeping toward me. What happened with the first-class complaint today? Hannah, as lead flight attendant, you can't even calm a passenger down. You let a customer scream in the cabin for 30 minutes. Where's your crisis management? I stood there, my back ramrod straight, saying nothing. Sophie sat next to Adrian, her eyes red, speaking timidly. Captain Pierce, it's not Hannah's fault. I'm the one who carelessly spilled a coffee. Quiet. Adrian cut her off, his eyes still locked on me. You're a pilot. The cabin is her responsibility. Hannah, are you taking your issues with me out on a new crew member during a flight? Watching her mess up and doing nothing, just to prove how competent you are? The conference room went deathly silent. Everyone looked at Adrian in disbelief. They all knew Sophie had caused the mess, that I'd taken the blame for her and endured 30 minutes of abuse. Yet Adrian, without any regard for right and wrong, was pushing all the responsibility onto me. I looked at this man. 7 years of love, in this moment, had become a complete joke. I raised my hand, slowly removed the gold badge on my chest that marked me as lead flight attendant, and gently placed it on the table. It was my fault, I said. My voice is flat as still water. I didn't look after the new crew member. I didn't handle the emergency properly. I accept whatever punishment the airline gives. Adrian was stunned for a moment, but then continued his rigid commands. 3 days grounded. Write me a thorough written reflection. I nodded. Fine. I turned and walked out of the conference room without a single lingering glance. Hannah's POV. During my 3 days grounded, I went to the airline medical center. The initial review for the Damascus deployment had passed. Today was the day for the in-depth physical. The flight doctor was maybe in his 50s. He looked at my paperwork and sighed. Ms. Bennett, you need to really think this through. Damascus, an airport that was bombed just last month. If you go, you'll be living on the edge of death. You're so young. Why would you choose to go there? I smiled, my eyes clear. It suits me better. He shook his head and pulled a thick document from his drawer, handing it to me. This is the liability waiver. Once you sign, if anything happens to you in Damascus, the airline only covers the death benefit. They take no other responsibility. Think it over. I took the pen and signed my name on the last page without any hesitation. The pen scratched across the paper with a soft rasp, like it was severing every tie to the past. Coming out of the office, I walked toward the exit with my exam reports. Just as I rounded the corner, I ran face first into Adrian and Sophie. Sophie's index finger was wrapped in gauze. She was leaning against Adrian, pouting. Captain Pierce, it hurts so much. Will it leave a scar? Adrian looked down at her hand with rare patience. It's just a little nick from cutting fruit. The doctor said it would have healed on its own if you'd come even a little later. Don't worry. When Adrian looked up, he saw me standing not far away. He froze, his gaze quickly scanning my pale face, finally landing on the stack of papers in my hand. Are you sick? Adrian's brow furrowed, and he instinctively took a step forward. I tucked the exam papers behind me, my tone indifferent. No, just a routine checkup. When Sophie saw me, she straightened up immediately. She deliberately raised her bandaged finger and said sweetly, Hannah, are you here to see the doctor too? Captain Pierce says I can't get my hand wet, so he's going to be cooking at home for me these next few days. You don't mind, do you? Cooking for her. That kitchen that had once been mine alone. That kitchen where Adrian had hugged me from behind to teach me how to cook. It was about to welcome a new mistress. I looked at Sophie's provocative face and said calmly, That's nice. I've got things to do. I'm going. I walked past them, heading straight forward. Adrian grabbed my wrist. Hannah, what exactly are you angry about? Adrian lowered his voice. 3 days grounded hasn't been enough to wake you up. You won't be satisfied until our relationship is completely broken. I lowered my head and pried his fingers off one by one. I'm very awake. I looked up and stared into his eyes. The corners of my mouth even curved up in the faintest smile. Captain Pierce, I wish you both happiness. With that, I turned and left. The day before I left New York, I did the final cleanup in the apartment. I called a local courier and shipped off the few old clothes and books that were mine. Everything else, anything I couldn't take, I threw into trash bags. All those expensive dresses, bags, and jewelry Adrian had bought me, I didn't take a single thing. I hung them neatly in the closet. I walked to the vanity, pulled open the drawer, and took out a velvet box. I opened it. Inside lay a plain band. It was the ring Adrian had bought when he proposed to me in Paris years ago. He'd said once he got promoted, we'd get married. I'd worn this ring for years. The band already had fine scratches on it. I took the ring off and placed it on the living room table. Next to it, I set down the apartment key I'd used for years. When everything was done, the whole apartment felt empty, as clean and soulless as a model home. No more of my slippers, no more of my water glass, none of the traces of my life left behind. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Adrian. There's a banquet tonight with people from the airline. Come, stop sulking. We'll talk things through together and the grounding business will be over. I looked at the words on the screen and found it a little funny. He thought I was throwing a tantrum. He thought all he had to do was wave his hand and I'd come crawling back gratefully like before. I tapped lightly and replied, "Okay,